Okay, the next lesson that we're going to look at is finding the area of a right triangle on a grid paper. First of all, we have to understand when we are looking to find the area of a triangle, we're going to take the area of a triangle and the formula is going to be to take 1/2 the base times the height, or sometimes they'll just say base times height and they'll divide it by 2. But on grid paper, you don't have to worry about that so much because the grid paper automatically gives you the right angle marking. And you need the right angle marking so that you know what your base is and you know what your height or your altitude would be. When you're on grid paper, you could take a look and you could almost just extend your triangle so that it looks like a rectangle or a square. In this case, it is a rectangle. And so if you shaded this in, we would know how to find the area of a square or a rectangle, length times width, like we did in the previous lesson. And in this case, it's real important to take a look at what they are using as their unit. They're saying that one edge, one side of this square is worth 1 unit. So if we take a look, we could say that this would be 1, 2, 3, this would be 4 units, and the other length would be 1, 2, 3 units, so we have 3 units. Finding the area of our rectangle, we would take the length and the width, 3 times 4, so we would have 3 units times 4 units, and of course the 3 times 4 will give us a product of 12, and then if we are multiplying units times units, we have units multiplied by itself twice. So we would get 12 units squared for the area of the entire shape. However, since we're only looking for the triangle, we could say that we would be cutting that in half. And so 12 units squared divided by 2 would end up giving us our 6 units squared, which would be the same thing as using our formula. But on grid paper, you have more of a visual. The next thing that I'm going to take a look at is finding the area of a triangle or its corresponding rectangle. Well, in this case, they're telling us the shaded triangle has an area of 34 inches squared. So that means this shaded area right here, which would be this area, they're saying is 34 inches squared. Well, they said find the area of the entire rectangle and be sure to include the correct unit in your answer. Well, if this particular triangle is 34 inches squared, then we would know that we would have to double it and the other area would be 34 inches squared. And so we would know that we would add them, find the sum, and we would have 68 inches squared. And that would be your answer. On some of the problems, they're actually giving you the entire area. They might say, oh, the rectangle has an area of 68 inches squared. What is the area of the shaded region? Well, now we would be using the inverse. We would be working backwards or opposite, and it would be 68 divided by 2, and then you would just come up with your 34 inches squared. The next thing, looking at a triangle where they're not putting it on grid paper and they're not making a rectangle. This is where they're saying find the area of the triangle. We must make sure that we use our formula, and the 2 key parts for finding the area of your triangle are going to be your base and your height, your base and your altitude. Those 2 dimensions, those 2 measures are the 2 that meet at a 90-degree angle. They are the 2 measures that are perpendicular. They would be perpendicular. And in this case, we would have to be looking at our 10 and we would be looking at our 24. And so we know that those are the numbers we are going to multiply. I think it's just as easy to say I know I have to take half half of 24 would be 12. 12 times 10 would give us our 120. We label it with yards, and it would be squared to the second power. If you had to, you could just say your 10 yards times 24 yards, and you would end up with your 240 yards squared. Divide that by 2, and you would end up with still getting your 120 yards squared. Very, very important to know that the two lengths, the two dimensions, the measures you need are the two that meet at a right angle. And that is it.